The Medal of Honor glinted on her chest like a challenge. And as General Danielle Marshall stood on the stage of the National Honor Conference in Washington, D.C., it felt less like a tribute and more like a target. She was the only black woman in a sea of uniforms. White men, chests broad with ribbons, hands resting easy on the backs of their chairs. The ceiling lights shone too brightly, exposing everything. Their expectations, her nerves, and the gap between them. Her dress blues had never felt heavier. Even the applause that greeted her as she approached the microphone sounded brittle, forced. She recognized the rhythm. It was the same kind of applause that said, "You're tolerated, not celebrated." She barely touched the mic before the crack in the room split wide open. "Take it off," came a sharp voice from the front row, a voice that could still command battalions. Retired Judge and General Ronald Baxter, white-haired, medals clinking with every movement, stood up, his jaw set like concrete. "Take off your medal, General. There are real veterans in this room. This isn't the place for pageantry." The silence that followed was alive. Hundreds of officers, some stone-faced, some embarrassed, some savoring the spectacle, turned to look at her. Some didn't bother to hide their smirks. Others looked away, as if not seeing made it less real. For one heart-stopping moment, Danielle forgot the weight of the medal, the applause, the speeches she'd practiced for nights alone in hotel rooms. She was back in Aleppo, dirt and blood on her hands, dragging bodies under machine gun fire, wondering if she would ever see sunlight again. She froze. She could still feel the scar on her left shoulder, the ache in her knee that never really healed. She could hear the whine of artillery. She remembered the smell of burning sand, the heat, the shouting in two languages. None of it seemed to matter now. Not here. Not under these lights, in front of these men. Her first instinct was to step back, to disappear. She felt the audience's eyes closing around her like a fist. Baxter was still standing. His face was hard, his tone final. "This room is for soldiers who fought real wars, General Marshall. Not for—" He didn't finish. Someone in the fourth row stood up, slow and deliberate. A young sergeant, skin dark as hers, dress blues pressed sharp. He looked straight at Baxter. "If she takes off her medal, sir, we all take off ours." A few heads turned. For a heartbeat, the entire room seemed to hold its breath, and then another stood up. Then another. Within seconds, half the row, men and women, some black, some brown, some pale, rose in silence, medals glittering on their chests. The medal wasn't just metal. It was a story, a burden, a debt. Baxter's lips tightened. He scanned the standing soldiers, trying to read their faces, searching for the old order, the chain of command that always held. But something was shifting. Just beneath the surface, Danielle stared at the floor, fighting the urge to rip the medal from her uniform and throw it at his feet. But she didn't move. The sound of the medal brushing her coat was louder than the whispers spreading through the auditorium. A ripple of discomfort moved through the senior officers seated behind Baxter. A colonel cleared his throat. A general looked away, rubbing his jaw. Even the organizers, clustered by the curtains, suddenly found the floor fascinating. The silence deepened. But not for long. A voice, broken, raspy, but clear, cut through the tension. She earned that medal. Not in a parade, but under fire. It was Joe Manning, retired, wheelchair-bound, the kind of veteran whose stories turned into legends. He rolled his chair to the aisle, his missing leg obvious beneath the army blanket. He lifted his chin, voice trembling but fierce. General Marshall carried me out of a burning BTR in Aleppo. I don't have half my leg, but I'm here because of her." Another veteran stood, this one younger, a scar slashing his jaw. She sewed up my arm with a combat knife. "You want to call that pageantry, sir?" Baxter, pale now, tried to regain control. "We're talking about the decorum of this event, not—" A Marine cut him off. "Sir, with all respect, you're not on the front anymore. She's not just a soldier. She's our commander." The tension in the room twisted, raw, and unfiltered. It wasn't just Marshall they were defending. It was themselves, their choices, their scars, their right to be seen. Danielle looked up, searching for the words she'd practiced. They were gone. All she had left was the truth. She straightened, felt her heart thudding in her chest, and took one step forward. The medal, suddenly, was just a piece of history, one that didn't belong to her alone. But before she could speak, a wave of movement rippled through the hall. Someone in the back lifted their phone, the screen glowing bright. "This is going live," they said. The words hit like gunfire. Phones were raised, cameras clicked, the confrontation, the humiliation, the stand. All of it broadcast, raw and unscripted, to the world beyond these four walls. And still, Danielle did not speak. Her silence said more than any speech. The faces in the crowd changed. Some wore shame, others, defiance. A few, finally, looked at her and saw not an imposter, but the very thing they claimed to respect. Baxter realized, too late, that he'd lost them. The moment stretched, holding its breath. Danielle's eyes met his. He looked away first, and in that fragile, electric pause, the hierarchy shifted. Her hands were steady as she finally reached for the microphone. Not to obey, not to explain, but simply to exist. "I wear this medal," she said quietly, "for every soldier who didn't make it home. If you want me to take it off, you'll have to take off yours first." The auditorium was utterly silent. Then, slowly, applause began. Not the stiff, perfunctory clapping from earlier, but something thunderous, rising, almost defiant. It built, wave after wave, until it felt like the room would burst. She did not smile. She did not cry. She just stood there, the only black woman on the stage, medal blazing in the lights, as her fellow soldiers, past and present, stood behind her. On that stage, in that hall, for the first time in her career, Danielle Marshall was not alone. And the men who had tried to silence her learned that day. Real valor needs no permission. The next morning, the city woke up to the story. Screens glowed from newsrooms to barracks. Phones buzzed in suburban kitchens. Laptops flickered on in silent military offices. The headline ran everywhere. "Judge demands medal stripped from war hero." Room erupts in protest. There was a photograph, blurry but unmistakable. Danielle Marshall, back straight, lips pressed tight, surrounded by soldiers standing in a line behind her. She should have been relieved, or proud, or angry. She felt nothing. She watched the news on mute from the unmade bed in her hotel room, shoes still by the door, medal on the nightstand like a heavy coin. Outside, rain slid down the window, blurring the Capitol dome in the distance. She let herself sit in the silence. It was safer there. On her phone, messages were piling up. Some she recognized, old friends, commanders, even her mother's neighbor in Detroit. Others were strangers, soldiers' parents, journalists, politicians who wanted a quote, a soundbite, a piece of the story. She scrolled past them all, She wanted to disappear, to run 10 miles through mud and sweat until the world shrank back to something simple. But she'd learned long ago, you can't run from a fight you didn't start. Her hand found the metal on the table. She traced the ridges, the cold, worn metal. She remembered how it felt when they pinned it on. 2 years ago, in a hospital in Ramstein, barely awake, blood still seeping through her bandages. She'd been embarrassed then, angry even. All she'd wanted was to sleep, to see the sun rise without someone asking her to relive what she'd survived. But now, the memory was different. Now it came back as humiliation. Last night's conference had been a trap, a test she could never pass. The applause, the cameras, the challenge from Baxter. None of it was new, but this time it was public. There would be no moving on, no quiet return to duty. She stood, pulled on her uniform, fixed her hair, and pinned the medal to her chest. The weight settled over her heart. A promise, a challenge. She left the hotel, sunglasses hiding her eyes, steps measured and silent. She passed through the lobby without a word. No one stopped her. They'd all seen the news. Outside, the air was sharp with rain. She turned up her collar and walked fast, the city's morning crowd parting around her, not recognizing her, not caring who she was beneath the uniform. That was the only comfort left. For a few minutes, she was invisible. But it didn't last. She was halfway down the block when she heard them. "Hey, General Marshal!" A voice, young, uncertain. She kept walking, but the footsteps hurried up behind her, sneakers on wet concrete. She stopped, turned. 2 soldiers in fatigues, barely out of basic, faces eager and awkward. One held up his phone, nervously. Could we get a photo with you? My dad, he served in Mosul. He said you saved his CO. He wanted me to say thank you." She didn't want a photo. She didn't want to be remembered for this. But the kid's hands were shaking. She nodded once, barely smiling. Let them snap the picture. They thanked her, stammering, and hurried away. She stood there, metal shining in the gray light, wondering if this was how it would always be. A symbol, a target, a story that didn't belong to her anymore. The Pentagon called at 8:14 a.m. Not a general, not a secretary. Her old mentor, Colonel Anita Glass. Anita's voice was low, cautious, already tired. "Danielle, you okay?" "I'm fine." Liar. She almost laughed. Almost. "There's fallout. They're asking if you want to make a statement. Press social. I told them to back off." No statement. A pause. Anita hesitated. "Baxter's camp called me this morning. He wants to apologize. Privately. Let him do it publicly." Another pause. "There are people high up who want this to go away. Clean, quiet. You know how it is." Danielle let the silence stretch. "I'm not interested in clean or quiet. Not today." Anita let out a long sigh. "I figured. Listen. Don't let them turn this into a circus. They'll try. They always do." Danielle almost asked, "Who is they?" But she already knew. It wasn't just Baxter. It was every man in that room last night who looked through her, not at her. Every supervisor who told her she was exceptional, but not quite the right fit for command. Every soldier who whispered that her medals were for show, that her scars were just luck. She hung up. Outside, the city was waking up. Horns, voices, footsteps. She could have blended in, But she walked faster, metal shining, head up. Let them see her. Let them remember. She made her way to Arlington. The cemetery was quiet in the morning, the air heavy with dew. Rows of white stones, perfect and endless, faded into the mist. Danielle always came here when things felt too big, too loud, too hopeless. It was the only place she could talk to her friends without interruption. She found the grave easily. Specialist Leonard Ross, her radio operator, killed in Aleppo, the day before she dragged the rest out. She knelt, rain soaking her knees, and pressed her hand to the cool marble. "Hey, Lenny," she whispered. "Wish you were here. Wish you could tell me what to do." She closed her eyes. She could still see his face, brown skin, wide grin, always a joke at the ready. The day they lost him, she'd made a promise. She'd never let his memory get rewritten, not by men like Baxter, not by anyone. She stayed there for a long time, letting the quiet settle her, letting the past remind her who she was. When she stood, she felt stronger. She returned to the hotel just before noon. The lobby was buzzing. Conference attendees in crisp suits, cameras everywhere. She was about to slip past when she heard shouting. At the registration desk, a woman was arguing with a security guard. She was black, older, dressed in scrubs, hair wrapped in a scarf. Her name tag read, Johns Hopkins Medical. The guard's tone was flat, bored. "Ma'am, I can't let you in. This is a private event." The woman bristled. "I'm a speaker, panel on combat trauma. My name is right there." The guard didn't even look. "I need to check with my supervisor." Danielle's jaw tightened. She'd seen this too many times. A challenge, a delay, a door half open, half closed. She stepped forward, badge flashing, voice clear. "She's with me." The guard froze. The woman blinked, surprised. Then relief flickered over her face. Danielle nodded to her. "You're Dr. Williams, right?" "Yes." "Come on. They're waiting for you upstairs." Together, they strode past the desk. Danielle could feel the stares, the murmurs, the unease that always came when rules bent for someone who wasn't supposed to matter. In the elevator, Dr. Williams let out a breath. "Thank you. They do this every year. Every time." Danielle nodded. "I know." Williams looked at her, searching her face. "Saw you on the news. That was something." Danielle shrugged. "It wasn't supposed to be." Williams smiled, sad and knowing. "It never is." Upstairs, the conference was in chaos. Panels canceled, speeches rewritten, organizers huddled in corners, whispering frantically. Danielle could see them watching her, some with open admiration, some with thinly veiled resentment. She found her assigned panel, slipped into a chair at the end of the table, and listened as Dr. Williams spoke. She talked about pain, healing, the hidden wounds soldiers carried home. Danielle saw the faces in the room, young, old, hard, and soft, all straining to listen, to understand. When it was her turn to speak, she kept it short. "I'm not here to talk about medals," she said, her voice steady. "I'm here because I survived, because too many of my friends didn't. Because leadership is about more than what you wear on your chest. It's about what you carry inside." There was a pause, then quiet applause. Not loud, but real. Afterwards, people approached her. Some wanted advice. Some wanted to share their stories. Others just wanted to shake her hand. She listened to them all. She remembered their names, but always, in the corner of the room, she could feel the gaze of men like Baxter, watching, waiting, daring her to slip up. Later that afternoon, she stepped out into the hallway and almost collided with a tall, broad-shouldered man in a general's uniform. General Ray McAllister, Chief of Army Staff, eyes steely, voice measured. "Marshal, a word." She followed him down a side corridor, away from the crowd. He turned, arms crossed. "You made quite a scene last night." She didn't answer. He looked her up and down, searching for a crack. "Baxter's been calling everyone in Washington this morning. He says you humiliated him." She felt her jaw clench. He humiliated himself. McAllister nodded, almost grudgingly. "Maybe so. But you're in the spotlight now. You know what that means?" She didn't flinch. "Yes, sir." He sighed, softer now. "I served in Iraq. I know what it's like. Men like Baxter, they hate seeing the world change. They want to keep the club closed. You're not their kind of hero." She met his eyes. "I'm not here for them." He almost smiled. "Good. Because you're up for a new command. Commandant, Military Leadership Academy. You want it?" She blinked. She hadn't expected this. "Yes, sir." He nodded. "You'll be the first. First woman. First black woman. First in a lot of ways. That scares people. It should. Don't let them run you off the field." She felt something break loose inside her. Pride, fear, relief. She nodded once. "Thank you, sir." He put a hand on her shoulder, brief but real. "Don't thank me yet. It's going to get rough." He walked away, leaving her standing alone in the hallway, metal heavy, future suddenly wide open. That night, she returned to her room, exhausted. She dropped onto the bed, letting her uniform slide to the floor. The city lights blinked outside her window. Her phone buzzed again and again. This time, she picked it up. The messages had changed. They were longer now, more personal. Stories from other soldiers, women, men, young, old. They wrote about discrimination, about humiliation, about medals earned and doubted, about doors that never quite opened. Some told her she was an inspiration, others begged her not to quit. One message caught her eye. It was from Joe Manning, the veteran in the wheelchair. "General Marshall, you probably don't remember me, but I remember you. Thank you for getting me out of that burning APC. If you ever need backup, you have it." She smiled, for the first time all day. She replied, "I remember you, Joe. Thank you for standing up. I won't forget it." Another message, this one from her mother. "You okay, Danny? News won't stop calling here. Don't let them get to you. Dad would be proud. Call me." She almost cried, but she didn't. She couldn't. The next day, the fallout continued. Baxter was all over the news, trying to spin the story, claiming misunderstanding, deep respect for all soldiers. The networks didn't buy it. Clips of him demanding Danielle remove her medal played on a loop, intercut with footage of her standing silent, soldiers rising in support. Editorials called it a turning point, and the medal is not just metal. America's heroes look like all of us. Command is more than a color or a gender. But in the comments, the hate ran thick. Old voices, anonymous now, wrote about lowering standards, about political correctness, about real soldiers. Danielle didn't read them. She'd learned years ago, don't feed the trolls. Her inbox was full of invitations, interviews, talk shows, podcasts, lectures. She said no to all of them. She agreed only to one, a meeting with a group of cadets from West Point, who had written her a letter signed by 60 names. She arrived at the academy on a cold, bright morning, dressed not in her uniform, but in jeans and a sweater. The cadets were waiting in a classroom, nervous, notebooks open. She sat at the front of the room, let them ask their questions. How do you handle it? The doubt? The pressure? She looked at them, these future officers, so eager and uncertain. You keep going, she said. You remember who you are. You remember the people you fought for. You remember the ones who didn't make it. You stand your ground, even when you're outnumbered, especially then. A girl in the front row, hair braided tight, asked, "Did you ever want to quit?" Danielle smiled, tired. "Every day. But I didn't, because if I quit, they win." Another cadet, voice low. "Do you think it'll ever get better?" She didn't lie. "Not soon. Maybe not in my lifetime. But if you keep showing up, if you keep fighting, if you keep earning your place, maybe one day the fight won't be so hard for the ones who come after you." She left the room to applause, real, unguarded, a promise that maybe the world was changing, if only a little. On her way back, she stopped by a coffee shop near the base. The place was packed, warm with steam and laughter. She found a table by the window, set down her bag, and waited for her order. A woman slid into the seat across from her without asking. Danielle looked up, surprised. The woman was in civilian clothes, mid-40s, eyes hard and kind all at once. "You're Marshall." Danielle nodded. "I'm Maria Lewis. I was Baxter's aide a long time ago. I wanted you to know, he's not just an old man yelling at clouds. He's been blocking women and black officers from promotion for decades. Everyone knows it. Everyone's afraid." Danielle's hands tightened around her cup. "Why tell me?" Maria shrugged. "Because you stood up to him. Because you didn't back down. Because a lot of us never could. I wanted you to know. It matters." Danielle let the silence stretch between them, heavy and honest. Maria stood to go. "Don't let them shut you up. They'll try. But you already won, even if it doesn't feel like it." That night, the medal felt lighter. For the first time, she took it off and placed it in the drawer. Not because she was ashamed, but because she knew. Her worth didn't hang from a ribbon. It was in every battle, every scar, every soldier who stood up when she needed them. It was in the story she refused to let them rewrite. Outside, the city glowed. Tomorrow would bring new fights, new challenges. But for now, Danielle Marshall let herself rest. Medal tucked away. Heart steady. Future unwritten. And absolutely hers. The world kept turning, but nothing went back to normal. The week after the conference, the ripple became a wave. Danielle Marshall's inbox never slept. Old friends, enemies, generals, privates, mothers, fathers, journalists, angry strangers, grateful strangers. Her image, standing, silent, eyes burning as soldiers rose behind her, became a symbol in places she would never see. She didn't want to be a symbol. She wanted to serve. But she'd already learned. Sometimes the world chooses you. The calls from the Pentagon grew more urgent. The academy post was officially hers. First black woman, first combat vet in 2 generations. First whose leadership was now a trending hashtag. The Secretary of Defense asked for a quiet meeting. Her own soldiers, young, hungry, mostly overlooked, sent her photos of their medals with the words, "Still standing." Even her old rivals called, offering congratulations laced with caution. Baxter tried to apologize, but by then his world had shrunk to a quiet office and a public relations disaster. Under pressure, he released a public statement. My comments were inappropriate and unworthy of the men and women who serve. I apologize to General Marshall and to all those I have failed to respect. No one believed he meant it. He resigned quietly, before the board could vote him out. For a while, Danielle didn't say a word. She refused interviews. She turned down late-night shows, magazines, the offers to ghostwrite her memoir. She let her silence fill the space where others tried to tell her story for her. But the story didn't die down. It kept growing, living its own life. Everywhere she went, across the Pentagon, at the Academy gates, on the metro, strangers stopped her. They wanted to thank her, or ask questions, or just see for themselves that she was real. Once, an elderly white veteran in a tattered cap pressed her hand, tears bright in his eyes. It's about damn time, General. About time someone like you was at the front. She didn't always know what to say. Sometimes she just nodded and kept walking. But inside, something had shifted. The shame of that night at the conference, the humiliation, the doubt, had burned away, leaving only a stubborn, steady flame. She was still angry, but it wasn't the wild, bitter anger of her younger years. It was a clean heat, focused and clear, pushing her forward. She stepped into her new command with all the eyes of the country watching. The Academy had never seen a commandant like her. Sharp voice, no patience for empty flattery, quick to smile but quicker to cut down arrogance. She made time for the students who never got seen, and she held the highest standards for those who thought they could coast. Her door was open, but so was her memory. She remembered every face, every story. On her first morning, she stood at the podium in the Great Hall, sunlight streaming across polished wood and rows of cadets. The room was tense, waiting. Some looked at her with awe, others with resentment. But all of them were listening. She spoke quietly, her words dropping into the silence like stones. You know who I am. You know what happened. I didn't choose to be in the headlines, but I did choose to lead. Leadership isn't about medals or press conferences or what the internet thinks of you. It's about who you are when no one's watching, who you defend when it costs you something, who you lift up, even when it's easier to stay quiet. Her eyes swept the hall. She saw hope. She saw defiance. She saw the faces of 1,000 stories that would never make the news. I stand here because soldiers before me fought battles that had nothing to do with the enemy. I stand here because people stood up for me when it mattered. Some of you will be asked to stand up when it isn't safe, or easy, or popular. You'll be asked to make space for someone who doesn't look like you, doesn't sound like you. You'll have to decide, every day, what kind of leader you want to be. She paused, felt the weight of the moment. If you want to wear this uniform, you have to earn it every day, for yourself, for those who can't, for those who never got the chance. The applause was soft at first, then building. No one stood, no spectacle, no viral video, just the sound of hands, steady and honest. She expected pushback. It came quietly at first, in whispers in the hallway, in faculty meetings that went silent when she entered. Old guard officers sent emails about tradition and fit. A few donors threatened to pull funding. Anonymous letters called her a political hire, divisive, dangerous. She kept every one, a stack growing in her desk drawer. But for every letter, there were 3 more from parents, students, young officers in distant bases. I stayed in because of you. You made me believe it's possible. My daughter watches you on the news and says, I want to be her. She met with Baxter's former supporters in the Academy's boardroom, their faces hard and careful. She answered every question, refused to be baited, and when they tried to dismiss her, she looked them straight in the eye and asked, "How many medals do I have to earn before I get to speak?" They couldn't answer. The real change started slow. She mentored cadets who had been sidelined for years. Women, black students, first-generation immigrants, quiet kids from nowhere towns. She pushed them harder than anyone else. She remembered what it felt like to be tested, over and over, just for the right to stand in the room. The ones who resented her most, usually the privileged, the certain, the loud, she challenged to lead alongside the overlooked. She paired them for night exercises, for team missions, for impossible scenarios where rank and background didn't matter, only grit and trust and heart. Some cracked, some transformed. The Academy started to change, almost in spite of itself, and when the time came for the annual medal ceremony, when all the cadets, instructors, and families gathered in the vast hall under a sea of banners, she walked in not at the front, but at the end, quiet and watchful. One by one, medals were pinned, stories told, names read aloud, some known, some forgotten. Then it was her turn. The master of ceremonies called her name, and she stood at attention, letting the moment come to her. A young cadet, small, black-haired, with scars peeking from her collar, stood up in the front row. "Ma'am," she called, voice shaking but sure. "You showed us what courage looks like. On behalf of all of us, those who never thought they'd make it here, we honor you." The hall fell silent. Then, without prompting, cadets across the room stood. Some took off their medals and held them out, an unspoken tribute, not to replace hers, but to say, "Now we stand with you." It was not loud. It was not orchestrated. But in that room, for the first time, the medals meant something new, not just survival or heroism, but the right to belong. Danielle stood straighter, heart pounding. She felt tears sting her eyes, hot, unwelcome, but real. She let them fall. She spoke just once, her voice quiet and raw. "We don't fight for medals, we fight for each other." The story did not end with a parade or a speech. It became something quieter, deeper. Soldiers who'd never been seen before stepped forward. Some left old wounds behind. Some found the strength to stay. Baxter faded into the background, a cautionary tale, his old power now just an echo. But Danielle Marshall's legacy grew, not as a single triumph, but as the quiet, persistent courage to hold her ground and make space for the ones coming after. And the Medal of Honor, once a target, once a burden, became finally what it was meant to be. Not the end of the story, but the beginning of something greater. For the first time, she was not alone on the stage. The medals gleamed, not as armor, but as a promise. A future shaped by those who dared to stand up, and those who never, ever sat back down.